Guys, how are y'all doing? I'm doing pretty good right now. Had an annoying experience recently, but not too annoying. Just encountered one of the annoying things that you have to put up with online shopping. That is the fraud alerts. And I say that those are annoying because I had to get some groceries, and even though that's pretty common for me, it's like, oop, you tried to spend some money, and we suspect that you didn't, so please verify that you did, kind of thing. Pretty regular enough, though, that it shouldn't ever come up. Especially since they know that people have to get food. Anyway, let me get things situated by sharing out the link. Alright. Here. Alright, so that's that one. That's good that the bot's up. Alright, so we got those things, which is basically my message. Alright, and then to check on other things, don't go dark. Alright. We know that one, so I can deal with that later. Let me do that. This. good. That one. That one. This one. This one. Two more places. This. And here. Alright, that covers that. Now, we bring up the game, and then we'll switch on over. Here we are. Welcome in, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. As I said, I encountered an annoying thing recently, but I'm glad to be able to keep going through this visual novel here. Speaking of visual novels, like I said before, since this is a visual novel, if you guys aren't interested, go ahead and leave. But as for me, I want to keep going with this. It got really intense last time when I actually started this, so let's see how things play out this time. See. My gaze landed on the tattered notebook that was left on the ground. Leland had torn it clean in half. Since it was hardcover, it'd be impossible to restore it. I guess it could still be used if I tried fixing it up with some tape, but I figured acting on my own wouldn't be a very good idea. I picked up the pieces. I remembered Higa's surprisingly messy handwriting. The silence was so painful that I ended up reading through the remnants of the book. The text on the first few pages alone had different handwriting. I guess someone else wrote in here too, just for those parts. The question was who? I'll make dinner. Leland stood up. I'll do it. I finally managed to squeeze some words out. Why? Well, you're injured. That has nothing to do with my job. I couldn't bring myself to follow up. I reverted to my old self from when I was living with my aunt. How can I word things in a way that won't make her mad? I would frantically try to figure out what she wanted to hear. In the event that I couldn't, I'd freeze up. I was a mere scarecrow in my own home. Dinner was ready in 15 minutes. We ate in silence, took our baths, and slept. Iga didn't return that day, or the next, or the day after that. We didn't see any trace of her. She had no home to return to. She hadn't paid for fire insurance yet, and all of her belongings were still here. She couldn't get any money from the bank without her card. I'd planned to sit her down and talk things out with her when she returned. But I didn't even consider the possibility that she just wouldn't come back. Going 3 days without eating or drinking would put her life at risk. The Cory searched too, but there wasn't a single trace of her on Toyotoki Island. Despite being relatively small, there were plenty of places one could go here if they didn't want to be found. Could she have left the island? If she did, someone would have seen her at the boarding area. There was nowhere to hide, considering there weren't many people who used it to begin with. We definitely wouldn't have known if she hid in the cargo area, but would she think to go that far? It wasn't totally unthinkable for her to do something irreversible. I wanted to look for her. But work called even in times of crisis. I bet I'd even have to work in the apocalypse. I don't think you would have to work there, but you'd have to definitely do everything to take care of your survival. You're completely useless, Nishime. How could you let her get away? Of course it'd be hard for her to return home. She was kicked out with nowhere to go, you fool. I asked my co-workers if they had seen Higa, and the situation reached Suzuki's ears too. She pressed me for more info, refusing to let me go until I gave her all the details. I couldn't keep anything from her. She gave me a harsh dose of reality on top of her advice. I was relentlessly criticized for my mistakes. It hurt, but I definitely deserved it. I'll let you know if I see her, and when I do, make sure you're the one to pick her up. Yes, ma'am. Your responses are superb now. Work hard so that everything else can rise to that level too. She punched me in the back. Tough love was painful indeed. I finally had a day off. Going on. This is a different scenery though. Like, is this the hotel? Or is it the nursing home? Because the beds look like it'll be a hospital or nursing home. So I decided to visit the retirement home. Looks like I was right. There was still no trace of Higa. I assumed she would leave a clue or two due to her current state, but the fact that there weren't any gave me a bad feeling. How was she able to disappear without any help? Awful scenarios began to play out in my mind. I wanted to deny them, but they made the most sense considering the circumstances. Toyotoki Island was surrounded by ocean. It would be almost too easy to disappear without anyone knowing. Hello? Who are you visiting today? It was a different staff member from the one I met before. I cut to the chase and explained that Higa had gone missing. You can't find her at all? Yeah, she has no money and none of her friends seem to know where she is either. Please wait a moment. She went into the office to make a phone call. From what I could hear, she is calling some co-workers who weren't in that day. She returned after several different conversations. It seems like she visited the day before yesterday. Really? Higa had left Toyotoki Island after all. Someone would have seen her at the ferry though. What if she went farther away than I thought? That couldn't be it. There was nowhere for her to go. She was probably somewhere on Hisaku Island. Did she say where she was going at all? I'm afraid not. Could I ask the residents here if they heard anything? Go ahead. I was given permission to enter the premises. I changed into slippers and went to the lounge. As soon as I walked in, all the residents who were watching TV immediately turned to look at me. I was expecting them to recognize me to some degree. I was prepared for them to surround me and say hi, just like last time when I was with Higa. But that didn't happen. Their expressions didn't change at all. They even seemed worried, looking at me as if A complete stranger had walked in. Hold on. Nothing too much there. Okay, it was true that Higa wasn't here with me this time. But would that alone cause such a huge difference in attitude? I quickly passed through the lounge and headed toward Higa's grandmother's room. Hello? I opened the door to find that she had other visitors. They turned to look at me with a polite smile, probably thinking I was part of the facility's staff. Their expressions hardened upon seeing that I wasn't. Who are you? The boy looked around 16 years old. There was also a girl, probably around the same age, and another man and woman who looked slightly older than me. It was clearly a family visit. I didn't even consider the possibility of other people being here. Oh, are you Higa's relatives by any chance? No, we aren't. The man answered bluntly. His reply jogged my memory. Higa didn't have parents. She told me her grandmother raised her. In other words, she didn't have any other family. So who were these people? I knew I was in the right room. The room was arranged the way I remembered it, and the old lady lying in the bed was indeed Higa's grandmother, but she looked at me with the same expression as the other residents a few seconds earlier. I felt the urge to leave right then and there, but I forced myself to speak. I'm searching for Samugi Higa. Who's that? A chill ran up my spine. I believe she's Shoko's granddaughter. We don't know anyone like that. You don't? We don't. Who was I looking at then? I rubbed my eyes and looked at the person on the bed one more time. She was definitely Higa's grandmother. There was no mistake about it. I just heard that Higa was here 2 days ago. She's your granddaughter, right? I asked her directly, but she simply shook her head in response. I don't know her. My only grandchildren are Michiko and Ryuji. She pointed to the 2 youngest people in the room. That can't be. I saw them with my very own eyes. We spoke in this exact room. She had to be Higa's grandmother. The way they spoke to each other, there was no way. But the scene before me said otherwise. She seemed like a completely different person. Did Higa's grandmother switch places with someone? I couldn't believe what was happening. I wanted it to be a hallucination. A sense of confusion and loneliness welled up inside me as if I was all alone in a parallel world. I'm not too sure about you guys, but I'm thinking that you should have brought the picture of her in her idol days. Because that could have helped clear things up a bit. Though at the same time, this retirement home did recognize the name and such, so she's not completely unknown. Alright, where did things go wrong? Let me go back. Yeah. Oh. Let me just read this over again. Did Higa's grandmother switch places with someone? I couldn't believe what was happening. I wanted it all to be a hallucination. A sense of confusion and loneliness welled up inside me as if I was all alone in a parallel world. Where did things go wrong? I got on the ferry back to Toyotoki Island. When I arrived, I passed through areas I hadn't searched yet. As I did, I discovered several places I hadn't explored, such as some farms and lighthouses. I wasn't exactly in the mood to sightsee, so I went through them without batting an eye. I completed a lap around the entire village in an hour. When I returned to the harbor, I saw a group of people dressed in kimono in the plaza. They were cleaning the area in front of the small shrine with brooms. Was this part of another ritual? The only one I really knew of was the Asato families, and I didn't exactly have the best impression of it. While they were the most powerful group of people on the island, they meant trouble. On the other hand, if I could get them to find Higa, my problems might have been solved pretty easily. The group began to disperse at some point, apparently done with their cleaning. I ended up following them out of curiosity and eventually arrived at the town hall. I never needed to go since arriving on the island, so it was my first time seeing it in person. It was so small that I would have never known it was important if not for the signage. There was an empty lot in front of it, several times larger than the building itself. There were some folded up tents on the ground. I also saw some men in work clothes spread about the lot. What was going on? Well, I didn't expect to see you here. I saw a familiar face emerging from the shadows of a tent. She was clad in her usual frilly pink dress. I turned to greet Goldilocks. Madam Kiriko? Why is he saying Madam right now? Maybe he was forced to say that in the hotel, but saying it here, I don't know why. Maybe just habit. She was just a younger girl until a short while ago, but now she was the owner of my workplace. My attempt at being professional and polite, however, just made her scowl. Please don't call me that here. I like to keep my personal and work life separate. Oh, is that so? Feel free to just call her the highly self-conscious Kiriko as usual. Akari popped up from behind Goldilocks. That just made it sound like she had some sort of medical condition, like high cholesterol or high blood pressure. A lot of people would assume that. Yeah, but a lot of problems like that is your diet and such. And for high blood pressure, it would be a high stress life, though the numbers used for blood pressure measuring, and I know this for a fact, is pretty much a joke. At least here where I am at, because the numbers are unrealistic since your blood pressure gets higher as you get older naturally, and the numbers that the groups here focus on are as unrealistic to get to as it is weight and height percentage, aka the BMI, so it's kind of a joke, really, since you can get diagnosed with either of these two quite easily. Not too sure about the rest of the world, but I know for the rest of the world you can't be diagnosed with hypertension as easily because the numbers are different, but those numbers are different because they live a healthier lifestyle in a lot of other places that aren't as car dependent. How dare you call me self-conscious? How would you like to be called flat-chested? Hey, that's sexual harassment. Should a prominent figure of a big business be doing such evil deeds? I could totally sue you. I'm so incredibly sorry. Goldilocks seemed pretty frustrated as she apologized. Should I have taken her side?
それで、夏祭りの準備で忙しいふりをしているあかりに、西目さんはどのような用事ですか？
Anyway, what do you want, Nishime? I'm trying to seem like I'm busy preparing for the summer festival here. Oh my gosh. You are gonna get yourself in trouble here, Kari. And that's why I want to punch you in the face. Oh, is that what this is for?
来週末に開催でしたよ。私の勇姿をぜひご覧くださいまし。
It begins at the end of the coming week. Now witness my greatness. Seemed like Goldilocks is going to do something pretty impressive based on her tone. Seemed like this conversation would drag on longer than intended, but as I thought that, Akari read the mood and kindly changed the subject.
比嘉さん、まだ見つかりませんか？
Is Higa still nowhere to be found? Yeah, I tried going to Hisaku Island too, and didn't find anything.
あら、人を探しているんですの？私の知っている方なら簡単に探せましたよ。
Oh, are you looking for someone? If it's someone I know, I could find them easily for you if you wish. Really, her name is Tsumugi Higa. You fired her right after she joined, remember?
ああ、
Oh, her. Goldilocks had quite the frown on her face before she continued.
豊時島の住人でしたの？私は存じ上げませんでしたけど。
So she was a resident here on Toyotoki Island? I didn't have the slightest clue. That isn't surprising considering she hasn't been here long. The stranger butted into our conversation. It was a man in an indigo kimono. He looked like he was in his 30s. He was still on the younger end of the spectrum in terms of the island's aging population. You know her? Her grandmother worked for us from time to time, but I haven't seen you before. How do you know Miss Higa? Oh, I'm actually Nishime's grandson. I briefly introduced myself and told him about my circumstances for being here. Oh yes, I've heard of you before. I see you've been getting along with the kids here on the island. He looked toward Akari and Goldilocks as he said so. With the way he said that, it was clear that I was being treated as an outsider. I hadn't been treated this way since my encounters with the Toyotoki Island Seniors Association. The man had a mysterious aura about him. He was out and about in a kimono, which made him stick out like a sore thumb. Who was he? As I tried to figure out who he was, Akari noticed and began to speak in a joking manner.
西目さん、まさか知らないなんてことはないと思いますが、一応お伝えしますと、こちらは大里本家のご子息、真治さんです。
Nishime, you should totally know him, but in case you didn't, his name is Shinji. He's the son of the Asato head family. So he was part of the Asato family. Of course I knew that. No, you didn't. Really? This is the first time I've spoken with you after all. He ratted me out. He seemed like the type to negotiate with people with a smile on his face. I didn't want to get involved with him more than I needed to. Going back to the Higas, Tsumugi's grandmother, Yoshie, is part of a family that's worked for us for generations. Tsumugi herself arrived 10 years ago. She hasn't shown herself much, however. It didn't seem like she had any friends growing up. Did you say her name was Yoshie? I thought her grandmother's name was Shoko. Where did you hear that? Tsumugi Higa's grandmother is indeed Yoshie Higa. In other words, the old woman at the facility on Hisaku Island was not her grandmother. Well, everyone had two. One on their dad's side, the other on their mom's. Well, yes, everyone does, but Sometimes one set of grandparents doesn't live to see the other side's grandparents. Or they're in a mental state to be able to recognize them. So I guess she still could be. But when I went to see her yesterday, neither she nor the people surrounding her seemed to know who Higa was. That meant Higa was calling some random old lady granny. And said old lady played along. But why?
通りで見たことがないわけですわ。しかし、大里家に仕えておいて、私に顔を見せないなんて不思議ですわね。
Well, I suppose it isn't surprising. I haven't seen her then, but it's still quite strange considering her family works for the Osatos. The conversation continued as I pondered to myself. I pushed my doubts aside and directed my attention back at the discussion at hand. Is that? Yeah. Okay, so nothing really happened there except that might have been a bug that happened. Let me check on things. I have to be vigilant of my outside messages today. Okay. That's anything that matters, so let's keep going. Let's see, the conversation continued as I pondered to myself. I pushed my doubts aside and directed my attention back to the discussion at hand. And she worked for the Asato family. That seemed like a pretty significant clue. Was she really a different person from the lady at the facility? I figured it'd be best to assume this moving forward. Have you tried visiting Yoshie's house? Not yet. It should still be there, so I'll give you the address. The way he spoke gave me a bad feeling, but I found it difficult to ask him for more details, so I decided to leave it alone. I handed him a pen and a piece of paper, and he drew me a map. The house was in the northern part of the island. It was apparently a small building located on a road that ran alongside the mountains. I hadn't been around there at all. I thought these mountain roads were completely deserted. Think you can get there okay? There aren't many landmarks to help guide you, I'm afraid. I think I'll be okay. I'll try heading there right away. Let me know if you can't find it, alright? We can try spreading the word with the island's broadcasting system. Thank you so much. He kindly gave me directions. I may not have needed to be cautious around him. He might not be so bad after all. Well, I have things to discuss with her myself, especially in regards to sorting her belongings. I stopped by the house to prepare for my hike. I drank plenty of water before heading out. Where are you going? Leland caught me right as I left. To look for Higa, I answered honestly. Leland didn't say anything back. I rarely went to the northern part of the island. Immediately north of the village were sugarcane fields. The area beyond that was a dense forest. You could easily tell that there was nothing to see by standing in front of the sugarcane field, so I never felt the need to go. I followed the path to the base of the mountain. Surprisingly, the road was paved. Trash littered the ground around it. One look was all it took to know that this area didn't get many visitors. It was a straight path, so I reached my destination pretty easily. I climbed the hill and saw a big boulder at the top. Beyond that was Higa's home. The map I was given said so. And sure enough, there it was. While the concrete walls surrounding it barely held up, the house itself was right where it was supposed to be. All the windows were shut, making it hard to determine if anyone was living in it at all. There were no cars. The house's wooden pillars seemed like they would give in at any moment. It didn't seem to be in any condition to house people. Was someone really living here? It made me uneasy. I decided to take a closer look, and what I found confirmed my suspicions. The electric line was disconnected. The end of it, which extended from the electric meter, was wrapped around a pillar. There was no power to this house. Maybe that's just how she wanted to live? That couldn't be it. This building was clearly abandoned. I thought back to earlier that day. Shinji from the Osato family mentioned something that bothered me. Something like, it should still be there. So it wouldn't be surprising if the house wasn't standing at all. Why? Because the owner, Higa's grandmother, had passed away. Interesting. Since when? I remembered something else Shinji said. He wanted to sort out Yoshie's belongings, so it had been quite some time since her death. I had to take a step back and organize my thoughts. The person I met at the assisted living facility on Hisaku Island was Shoko. Higa referred to her as Granny. Who was she really? On the other hand, the Osato family confirmed that Yoshie was her grandmother. She had been living in this house but passed away. This left Higa and Shoko's relationship a mystery. Were they only pretending to be related? If so, why did they feel the need to lie about it? I didn't have the slightest clue. What was Higa hiding? I stood in front of the abandoned building in a daze. All I could do was stare at the electric meter. Ooh, Samugi, huh? I noticed that the electricity wasn't working when I visited Grandma's house for the first time in ages. It shouldn't be a surprise considering no one lived here anymore. I couldn't help but feel shocked that they went so far as to cut the power. It rubbed the fact that no one would ever return in my face. I gently caressed the origami crane in my pocket. I made this with the residents at the assisted living facility some time ago. Despite this being Grandma's house, I couldn't help but think of Granny instead. I met her around the time I returned to Toyotoki Island. I was doing some work in the Hisaku Island area. It was a rare sunny day. Despite it being February, the temperature was surprisingly warm. Enough that I was sweating after a short walk. I believe it was right in front of the post office. I saw Granny sitting on a small step. She stared absent-mindedly at the road. Several people walked past her. Cars and bicycles also zoomed by. Everyone was heading somewhere. Everyone acted with purpose. Granny was the only one who wasn't in the midst of the hustle and bustle. That left quite the impression on me. Is something wrong? I couldn't help calling out to her. It didn't seem like she was waiting for anyone or sitting for any particular reason. She didn't even have any belongings with her. She was taking a break. She could have chosen a park bench. While she didn't look like she was in any distress, I couldn't leave her alone. And who might you be? She slowly raised her eyes to look at me.
私は日が紬です。何か困っているんですか?
I'm Samugi Higa. Do you need any help? I was just taking a walk, but suddenly couldn't bring myself to take another step.
足が痛いんですか?
Do your feet hurt? I'm absolutely parched and really tired.
それは大変。待っててください。
Oh, that doesn't sound good. Hold on. I spoke to someone at the post office and got some water. Granny drank it slowly.
家はどこなんですか?
Where's your house? Ota. Despite receiving a name, I was still very new to the area and didn't know where that was. Upon seeing me tilt my head in confusion, she pointed toward the mountains.
送っていきましょうか。
Shall I help you get home? I don't want to be a bother, but that would be a great help. Granny was a refined lady. Not only did she have a gentle way of speaking, but she clearly put thought into her clothing as well. As I carried her on my back, she told me that she was born on the mainland and moved here when she got married. She talked about how she lived with her family and spoke of her kind grandchildren. They were her pride and joy. Soon enough, we arrived at her house, which was located right at the foot of a mountain. It was surrounded by a dense thicket of trees. There were no cars, so I wasn't sure if anyone was home. I rang the doorbell anyway. Yes? Hello? A lady in her 50s appeared at the door. Her eyes widened upon seeing Granny and me. Mother, what's going on? Who's this?
郵便局の前に座り込んでいたので、家がこちらだと聞いて送ってきたんです。
I found her sitting in front of the post office. She told me her house was here, so I brought her. I told her about the circumstances behind how we met and why we were here. Despite my explanation, the woman still seemed flustered, and she rambled on. My mother-in-law doesn't live here. She's been admitted to an assisted living facility. Huh? Granny and I were both confused. Well, I had pretty much carried someone for over 3 kilometers for nothing, but I couldn't imagine how Granny must have felt. She thought she'd arrived home only to be told that she had gotten it wrong. This is my house. Who are you? Oh, this is dementia, huh? No wonder. So, she probably forgot Higa because of her mental condition, which is said to be dementia for everyone in her facility, so I'm not surprised that she's doing this. Oh, Mother, it's me, Etsuko. Please get it together. Where's Yoshiki? Please call him over. He's at work right now. They argued back and forth. It was like I wasn't even there. Eventually, the lady shifted her attention back to me. I'm grateful for your help, but she's supposed to be at the facility. She shouldn't be here.
家がここだって聞いたので。
I was told this was her house. I'm not surprised. In that case, I suppose I can take care of the rest. She clearly found her mother-in-law to be a nuisance. She didn't even try to hide it. I wonder why she treated Granny this way. You've caused her quite a bit of trouble. Can you apologize to her, Mother? Granny seemed puzzled and was deep in thought. I assumed it was because she was exhausted. Why am I home? What was I doing? Granny spoke completely befuddled. The daughter-in-law let out a loud and exaggerated huff of annoyance. She retorted with, "This is why I can't deal with you." Afterwards, she told me that Granny suffered from dementia. She had issues with her memory, causing her to grow forgetful. Usually when people with these symptoms began to experience difficulty getting by on their own, they would move to a dedicated facility. I couldn't imagine not being able to trust your own memories. Well, even if you don't have dementia, you shouldn't trust your own memories, because they are quite flawed and can be influenced. But this is definitely sad. No one knows when or why it happened. Oh yeah, I read it right. There was no cure for it. That was all the more reason to be there for Granny and treat her with patience and kindness. And yet the lady in front of me simply viewed her as a massive headache. There was no place for Granny here. I could see that this person had taken her one and only home away from her.
わかりました。グループホームの場所を教えてください。私が連れて行きます。
I understand now. Please let me know where the facility is. I'll take her there myself. I was probably overstepping, but I wanted to protect Granny from her family, who treated her with contempt. The facility was 8 kilometers away. Determined, I walked with her once more, sweat dripping down my back. It was already evening by the time we arrived. We were greeted by one of the facility's staff members who breathed a sigh of relief as she saw us. There you are, Miss Saeda. I was just on a walk with Michiko. We had a lovely time, isn't that right? She smiled at me. I nodded back without hesitation. Michiko was her granddaughter's name. Someone on the staff told me. Since she lived in Naha, Granny was only able to see her when she visited the area. I guess it had been a while since she last did, which was why Granny mistook me for her. And I never corrected her. If I did, she'd be crushed. Several days later, I went to see her again. I referred to myself as Michiko. I decided to act as her granddaughter. I told myself I was doing it for her. Deep down, I think I just wanted someone to look up to. Especially since Grandma was gone. Grandma and Granny. While their titles meant the same thing, the conditions behind them were very different.
おばあちゃん。
Grandma was currently in Grandma's sitting room. I sat down on a cushion that was no longer being used. Familiar scents filled the house. Memories of when I lived here with her flooded my mind. If only I could turn back time. My thoughts were taken over by a wish that would never come true. I couldn't believe that less than half a year had passed since her death. It felt like she'd come home at any second. Was that why I was so weak and helpless? I hugged my knees to my chest and looked out at the setting sun through the small opening between the shutters. There you are. I heard a voice. It came from Hikaru, who was standing at the door. The entrance wasn't locked. I saw Higa's shoes by the door, so I headed inside. The hallway was extremely dusty. Beyond that was a Japanese-style living room. It was small, with a low table placed in the center. The room was covered in the warm light of sunset, making the mood very somber. I found Higa sitting on the floor.
どうして
Mishime, what are you doing here? Someone from the Osato family directed me here. He told me this was your grandmother's place.
そうなんだ。
I see. I was really worried about you.
ごめん。リルーちゃん、怪我は
I'm sorry, is Leland alright? She said she was
よか
fine.
った
That's good. Conversation tapered off. I looked around the room, hoping to find something to talk about. The space felt very lived in. There was a clock on the wall that had run out of batteries, some mismatched teacups on the table, and a heated table left out to fight the heat. Were you living here before?
そうだよ。おばあちゃんと一緒にね。
You
聞いて
know,
るおばあちゃんの話。
yeah, with my grandma. Did you hear about her? I heard she passed away. Was she sick?
ううん私のせい。
No, it was my fault. I wonder why she would say that. Because usually when old people die, it's nobody's fault. They're just not in great condition anymore, and so they just pass on. I couldn't believe my ears. Did Higa play an active role in her own grandmother's death?
そう。 私のせいでおばあちゃんは死んだの。
Yes, it was entirely my fault she died. What do you mean? She responded as if to confirm my
せ
doubts.
っかくだから聞いてくれるかな、おばあちゃんのこと。
Since you're here, could you hear me out? I'll tell you what happened with Grandma. Smoogie. The very first thing I remembered was the ceiling of my grandmother's room. No, my grandmother's house. I donned white clothing and was lying on a futon. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't even know who I was. Whenever I tried to dig through my memories, it was no use. I had none whatsoever. I had no recollection of my childhood and none of even the day before. So when someone came into the room, I was so afraid and confused that all I could do was cry. I was told to eat something, but food was the least of my worries. Afterward, I was told at the hospital that I loved apples. Apparently, I had them constantly, but I didn't remember why I was there. I didn't even remember what apples were. When they said they were round red fruit, it still didn't ring a bell. I eventually had one and it was sweet and tasty. But that was it. I still couldn't remember a thing. They sat me down and told me I was Smoogie Higa. My parents passed away in a tragic accident and I was the sole survivor. I'd only just regained consciousness the day before, and after undergoing several tests, I was able to leave the hospital and go home to Grandma's house. I was walking fine, responded to every question I was asked, and went to the bathroom on my own with no issues. As they told me this, I pretended to remember it all. I was scared that they'd send me back to the hospital if I said otherwise. As for Grandma, she was already in pretty bad shape at that time. She told me that she worked for the Asado family, the most prominent figures on the island. Her work involved making their meals and cleaning their home. Ah, so she was a maid, huh? Her legs could barely support her, and she had a hard time traversing the mountain roads without a cane. How could someone like that take care of others? Well, she's probably retired. At this point, it baffled me. Looking back on it now, she was really an upstanding person. Despite her weak legs and hips, she continued to work and take care of me on top of that. But even if she wanted to quit her job, she couldn't because of me. I had also forgotten this at the time too, but here in Japan, anyone could land a decent job as long as they'd graduated high school or college. The reason why Grandma worked so hard was to save up enough money to send me to school. But the thing was, I wasn't very bright. I didn't know simple math. I couldn't even read. So Grandma took it upon herself to teach me everything from square one. She tried taking me on walks, and each time she did, I refused. It took a lot of courage for me to go out into the world I knew nothing about. That's why I was never admitted into any rehabilitation facilities or educational programs for people like me. Not to mention, there weren't any on the main island of Okinawa, and I didn't want to be apart from Grandma. My studies progressed very slowly and I had trouble holding conversations with people. But Grandma told me to take things slow and never got upset with me. She continued to shelter and feed me. After around half a year, I had gradually grown used to living in society. I finally had a grasp of its values and other social practices and realized how embarrassing it was for me to do nothing but sit at home and eat. I tried to help around more, or by cleaning and doing laundry, but I struggled to carry out simple tasks. Once I was asked to buy 3 fish at the store for dinner and came back with 6. I remembered that 3 came after 2, but when it came down to it, I thought that 6 came after 2 instead. It ended up being too much for just the two of us, so we had to give some to our neighbors. Despite not knowing much, I could still tell that my grandmother was poor. We never had much to eat. None of our belongings looked particularly expensive. We spent money sparingly. But despite that, Grandma forgave my slip-up with a smile. She patted my head and told me to take as much time as I needed to learn. I turned 16. I knew how to read and write and had also learned some math, so I set off to find a job around the island. There weren't too many places that were willing to hire me, though, considering I didn't receive a proper education, not to mention I'm pretty clumsy. I searched high and low and eventually found work as a fisherman. All I had to do was carry boxes of the day's catch. I received some fish for free as thanks. It was nice to not have to worry about food, but I wanted to do more for my grandma. It's fine. There's no need to push yourself so hard.
でも私、おばあちゃんにもっといいものを食べさせてあげたいの。
But I want you to be able to have even better food, Grandma. A few more years passed and I gathered up the courage to leave the island. I was willing to do anything to save up more money. I heard from several people that I could find plenty of jobs in Naha. It was hard to leave Grandma, but I figured it'd be okay as long as I made money. I was sure I could make her happy if I was able to earn a lot. I was full of confidence back then. I believed I had it in me to really make something of myself and reach heights no one else could. On the day of my departure, Grandma gave me a notebook as a parting gift. I didn't know anything about the big city, so I learned as much as I could and took notes in this. I hope this can help you too. Teachings she gleaned from books lined the pages of the thick notebook. I'm starting to think that the kind of person that Higa needs to see as a grief counselor. But I am still right that she needs to talk to a professional about this. If this is what the notebook is. All the detailed anecdotes written were overflowing with care and warmth.
ありがとう。大切にするね。
Thank you, I'll be sure to take good care of it. You're a hard worker, so I know you'll become an upstanding adult. She saw me off at the boarding area. I waved until my arm felt like it would fall off as the boat pulled out of the harbor. And ever since I left, that notebook has been my most cherished item. So that's why you ended up going to Naha, but what kind of work did you do that led to photos like this? Hikaru took a photo out of his pocket.
知ってたんだ。
You knew? I came across this by
黙
chance.
ってる必要もなかったのか。
I guess there was no point in hiding it from you. You were an idol, right? Was that your dream?
全然。
Nope.
稼げれば何でもよかったんだよ。
As long as I could earn money, anything worked. At the time, I had no idea what an idol was or what they did. Not only was I clueless about that, but I had completely forgotten everything I knew about Japanese culture and society. Which is why, despite everything I learned, it was still difficult for me to find anything in the city. I struggled to manage my living expenses. Before long, my search came to a standstill. One day, someone offered me a job as an idol. He said I had the looks and figure for it. He was a representative of some company. There was one thing he said that sold me. That becoming rich wasn't a far-off dream in this line of work. Rich wasn't a far-off dream? Yeah, right. You would become rich if you did things properly, like study the stock market and all that, but who am I to say that? It's just more so that your wealth is based on what you save. And that's tough for some people, I admit it. But that is definitely the truth. It was exactly what I was looking for. That was the extent of how I felt toward an idol work, no more, no less. I worked at a bunch of hostess bars the company introduced me to, and they also recommended going to an idol training school. They told me doing that would help me get by until I was able to make it big. But there was one big problem. The entrance fee for the program was 1,000,000 yen. There was just no way I could afford it. So I told the agent who approached me that I would quit. When I did, I was called in by the head of the company. You definitely have what it takes. I promise you that if you work for at least a year, you'll make it very far. Convinced, I decided to dedicate myself to becoming a full-fledged idol. I didn't think I had any other options. It was the first time anyone told me that I had talent. So I jumped at the opportunity. I was just that desperate. I will become a successful idol. And once I do, I'll earn tons of money so Grandma can take it easy. I fully convinced myself and stilled my resolve. But the reality was, I still couldn't afford the program. It'd be a dead end for me if I couldn't even pay for the enrollment fee. I was driven into a corner and eventually I asked my grandmother. I figured she'd be upset that my first letter to her since leaving would be a request for money. She was dirt poor. There was no way she'd accept. Thinking back, I probably sent that letter to put an end to things. You should have reached out to me earlier if you needed money. I have some saved up just for times like this. It turned out that she actually had the funds I needed. I was shocked to find 1,000,000 yen tucked into the envelope along with her reply. If this money can help you achieve your dreams, then I couldn't be any happier. I'll be there for you no matter what, so be sure to try your hardest. It was filled with heartwarming words. I held the letter to my chest and cried to myself for a bit. I had to meet her expectations. I had to work hard. So I went to the training school using my grandmother's money. I worked the hardest out of everyone there and made my debut as a trainee. While I didn't exactly make it big at first, the number of performances I participated in increased as the days went on. I even released my first CD after a year. I thought it was only going to be uphill from there. Never get that confident. Never. I really believed that. I didn't see favorable results the first year. I wasn't particularly happy with my work by the end of my second either. After the third and fourth, I was considered a kind of leading figure. But no matter how long I worked, I never got any money from it. Trainees were essentially treated like volunteers. It seemed like I'd never be able to work as a proper idol. As I grappled with my doubts, one day something happened that changed everything. I remember heading to my agency as usual. Good morning! I opened the door with a cheerful greeting, only to be met with an empty room. The brightly lit office was dark, and the mountains of the idol merchandise we had lying around was gone. I wonder, were they con artists if it's happened like this? Because she hasn't made any money in her time, and now it's all empty after a few years. It had been completely deserted, even the desks were nowhere to be seen. At first I thought I'd entered the wrong building. So I went outside, double-checked that I was at the right place, and confirmed that I was on the right floor before entering the room again. Nothing had changed. It was empty, not a single soul or item was in sight. I knew I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, so I figured there was just some construction going on and I didn't get the memo. Yeah, construction. I sat down on the sofa meant for guests and waited for someone to show up. Eventually, some fellow trainees arrived. We were all confused as to why the usual staff weren't there. You guys were conned. All we could do was talk about how strange the situation was. Night came. The company president never arrived. No one else had come, even though it was already time to go home. We had no idea what had happened. I only found out several days later. Some police officers came by. They briefly filled me in. Apparently they were searching for the agency's president. He'd vanished, taking all of our tuition money with him. What about the training program? It was definitely a dumb question. As I said, you were conned. But I couldn't help but ask. The officers looked at me sympathetically. Then they responded like they were scolding me. They told me that the entire thing was a scam. Yep. The agency's aim was the tuition fees. They falsely inspired young girls, told them that they were close to fame and success, and scammed them into handing over large sums of money. After a year, they'd give the girls small roles and tell them they'd be a star if they worked yet another year. The girls would make their debut after 2 years and release their own CDs. But that was it. The trainees would never become full-fledged idols, no matter how long they continued with the agency. That was how the president conducted his business. The key to this was motivating the girls, who were his precious source of income. He'd urge them to continue, asking them to hold on for just 1 more year and then do the same the next year and the year after until they grew too old. The girls weren't able to survive off of idol activities alone, so he arranged for them to work part-time at hostess bars. He earned a good amount of money from those arrangements as well. Once the girls were 25, he'd encourage them to work at these bars full-time. But she wasn't 25 yet. At least as far as I know. He'd continued to take advantage of them until they hit 30. It was a business that made lots of profit. So it's no surprise that the local Yakuza set their sights on it. The president waited until the contract renewal date to collect the New Year's tuition fees and then disappeared. Hold on, guys. I still have to take a look at things. Okay. Got something to take care of later. With that, the police concluded their explanation. Well then, what can I do to become an idol? Before I knew it, I had crumpled to the floor. I felt something warm on my cheeks. I wiped them to find that they were tears. Is there no way for me to make money? I recalled the days I spent working hard with my fellow trainees. They disappeared into the floorboards of my old apartment along with my tears. The police just stared down at me, unsure of what to do. What was I doing that entire time? I had it all planned out. I joined the training program, become an idol, rake in lots of cash, and send it back to my grandmother. That was the whole reason I'd asked for her to pay my entrance fee. I'd worked so hard for that goal the past 4 years. The president took the money and ran. He'd been feeding me lies from the very beginning. He only wanted to trick me into paying him. I'll be there for you no matter what, so be sure to try your hardest. The letter full of my grandmother's heartwarming words of encouragement was in was in my closet. She worked so hard to save up all that money, just for me to hand it over to such a scoundrel. I worked without proper pay for years. That was the point of me leaving home. How did I end up being such a pathetic excuse of a person? I cooped myself up at home, refusing to take a single step out the door for a while. There was no one I could turn to. I felt like such a failure. I was left without a job and didn't have any means to earn money. There was no point in me being in Naha, but I didn't feel like returning to Toyotoki Island either. Grandma was the one who had paid for my tuition. It was supposed to help me become an idol. I just couldn't bring myself to tell her that it was all fake. I moved to the city to make things easier for her, but it ended up being the exact opposite. How could I face her after all that? I had no choice but to stay in Naha with no particular purpose. So it's tragedy after tragedy for you, starting here, huh? I barely scraped by for around half a year, though. Half a year through part-time work. Time passed with me just doing the bare minimum, and one day I heard that Grandma collapsed. Someone from the Asato family told me. They said she was in a hospital on Hisaku Island, so I immediately made plans to go back. I left Naha on a ferry the day after I got the message. When I arrived, I ran to the hospital and asked for my grandmother. The time I spent in the waiting room felt like an eternity. Please follow me. The doctor led me down to the basement. Found Grandma in a cold room. She lay on a white futon. You're in the morgue now, huh? Her face was covered with a cloth. Grandma, I called home to her. She won't respond, but I do get her sadness here. There was no response. This can't be happening. Grandma, say something, anything, please. She suffered a terrible fall. I heard a voice coming from behind. I looked back to see a member of the Asato family standing by the door. She went on to tell me what happened. He went on to tell me what happened. Apparently she lost her balance and fell in the kitchen. She hit her head and lost consciousness. No one had been home at the time, so they only found her the following day. Okay. So it was an accident. If someone had been there and brought her to the hospital right away, she might have survived. It's truly unfortunate. He looked right in my eyes as he said that. The meaning behind those words was painfully clear. My legs gave out and I crumpled to the floor. Yoshie mentioned how she longed to live with her granddaughter under the same roof once more. Just where did you run off to and why? She even said money didn't matter as long as she could be with her granddaughter. Speaking of which, she seemed to spend her final years short on food. She must have lost a large amount of money at some point. Do you happen to know why? The man spoke as if to unearth my sins. I nodded with each one he brought up. It was all I could do. If only I had returned to the island. If only I hadn't been so adamant about staying on Naha. This wasn't your fault completely. You were definitely not in the know to determine if it was a scam or not. But it was definitely not your fault that she died. If only I had the talent to become an idol. If I'd done any of those things, that accident wouldn't have happened. And even if it did, I could have taken her to the hospital right away. So what were you doing in Naha? I really deserved those pointed words.
何をしていたんでしょうね。
I'd like to ask that myself. I had no idea. Why did I leave home? What was I doing that entire time in Naha? Lots of different people from the island came for Grandma's funeral. All of her acquaintances were there. I sat in one of the seats at the very front. There was discussion on whether to bury or cremate her. It sounded complicated, but it was ultimately decided based on her fine will that she'd be cremated. Her remains were placed at a grave site somewhere behind the house. There was nothing there to mark her spot. It didn't quite sink in that she was gone. I wanted to apologize to her if I could. I wanted to tell her how sorry I was for being such a failure of a granddaughter. But even if I did, it would never reach her ears. My mistakes would never disappear. So I thought it'd be best if I did instead. That was around the time that Kiminarai called for me. What the? Apparently she was acquainted with Grandma, going so far as to say they were friends. I barely paid attention as she told me this, until she suddenly lowered her voice and said, "Don't run away. Death wasn't a means towards salvation. The only way I could be forgiven was to keep living. My grandmother's soul would always be nearby. She would be watching me over me in my future. If I was really sorry, I had to become someone Grandma could be proud of." There was a lot of weight to Kiminarai's words. I resolved myself to live up to those expectations. At the same time, I remembered the notebook. It was her final gift to me. I thought back to what she said as she handed it to me. She told me to become an upstanding adult. So I worked hard to do just that. I tried as hard as I could to look for a job. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. But in the end, it was all for naught. Higa balled her hands into fists as they rested on her lap.
私は悔しかったんだよ。西目君も、みんなも、私より若くてちゃんと仕事をしてるのが。
I was so frustrated seeing you and everyone else able to do your jobs properly despite being younger than me.
憎かったんだよ。西目君を見るたびに、本当はこう思ってたんだよ。
I hated you all for it, and I always felt like that whenever I saw you, Nishime.
私と違って、できる子だなって。
I was jealous to see that you were capable and self-sufficient, unlike me.
普通に仕事をして、普通の大人になれるんだろうなって。
You could grow up to be a normal adult and do whatever job you were given.
私にはできないのに、どうしてできるんだろうなって。
All this time I was in so much pain, wondering why you could do all that when I couldn't. I froze up upon hearing her harsh words. I was used to people hating me. It had been a normal part of my life ever since I was a kid. But hearing that someone I trusted felt that way toward me made me numb. Higa always wore a kind smile. She made a soothing aura that made me feel safe and comfortable. I truly enjoyed being around her, but it was all completely one-sided. Higa didn't feel that way about me at all, not one
びっ
bit.
くりよ。西目くんが、君たちが。
I hate you, Nishime, everyone else too.
本当に、どうしようもなく。
I really do, I can't help it. I couldn't agree or disagree. I simply couldn't find the words to respond.
でも、これが本当の私。
I'm sorry, but this is the real me.
軽蔑したでしょ。
I'm just awful, huh? Well, I was finally able to squeeze something out.
はあ、最低だよね。ダメなのは自分のせいなのに。
Gosh, I'm just the worst, aren't I? It's my fault I'm such a sorry excuse for a person, but I keep blaming others for it. You aren't a sorry excuse for a
嘘
person.
だよ。君は調子のいいことばかり言うピエロだもの。
You're lying. You're just a clown who spouts whatever I want to hear. I mean... She shot me a steely glare which made my words catch in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I chose to remain silent. And as a result, Leland had to step in. Wait, Leland? That was my mistake. Oh, he's talking about this. But I didn't care anymore. It was time for me to break my silence, no matter the consequences. When I first met you, I thought you were really kind. You listened to everything I had to say, and I was amazed that someone like you was even real, because no one had ever done that for me before. You were the only one to give me the time of day. You were the only adult who treated me so kindly, even though we just met. I was just so shocked to see that there were adults out there who were nice like you. That's why it didn't matter to me whether you could do your job or not. I might be totally out of the line here, but it's true. I rambled about how I felt. I probably looked like some spoiled kid. Why are you in denial about yourself? Why is the one and only adult I found to be pretty amazing being so hard on herself? Higa's eyes widened. But when our gazes met, she simply laughed bitterly.
ごめんね。八つ当たりだったね。
Sorry, I was taking my anger out on you. You apologized right away too. You really are a great person.
持ち上げてくれなくていいよ。私は何にもなれなかった人だもの。
Don't waste your time flattering me. I'm just someone who ended up achieving nothing in life. Is that really a bad thing? You're being too hard on
ダメだ
yourself.
よ。立派にならなきゃいけなかったんだから。
Of course it is. I had to become an upstanding person after all. There it was again. I'd heard that phrase countless times, but it seemed to carry a different meaning now. She had to succeed. Her grandmother wanted this for her, and it was the whole reason she gave Higa so much money. I think she's misunderstanding her grandmother's intent here. Because I just think her grandma wanted her to be happy. She lived in poverty after that. If Higa were to acknowledge her mistake, it would be trampling all over her grandmother's goodwill. This was why she was adamant in following her grandmother's teachings and final wish, and was determined to become an upstanding adult. It was her only guiding light, but her fixation warped it into an obstacle that tripped her up with whatever she tried. It became a curse. She kept trying things that were doomed to fail, which in turn hurt her confidence. It was a vicious cycle. She didn't even need to achieve her goal by working. Being kind was a way of being understanding in its own right, after all. Wasn't that enough? That was my personal opinion. But what I thought didn't matter. In Higa's eyes, her worth was tied to finding a job that would make her grandmother proud. She refused to acknowledge any other method. She truly believed that was the only way. So she forced herself to bend over backwards to meet her own unrealistic expectations, only to fail every single time. And there was no way out of it. What was the best way to approach this? Nothing I said would register with her. Well, more like nothing anyone could say would. Let's see. Yeah, I read it right. Her grandmother was the only person who could talk some sense into her. Someone, anyone, please help her. She needs a mental health professional right now. Because I think they'll be able to help her understand her grandma's wishes. The moment I said my prayer in my mind, a shadow fell over me. I looked back, and there stood an expressionless Leland taking an imposing stance. What are you doing here?
あんたが比嘉を探しに行くって言うから後をつけたの。
You said you'd be looking for Higa, so I followed you. So you're eavesdropping this whole
聞
time?
くつもりはなかったわ。なんとなく声をかけづらかっただけ。
I didn't mean to listen in, I just couldn't find the right time to intervene. Leland strode past me to stand in front of Higa. In her hands were bags with Higa's belongings. I guess she came to return them to her, or in other words, to completely kick her out of her home. She took out the notebook. It was still in the same state, torn clean in half.
形見だって知らなかった。知っていたら手は出さなかった。
I didn't know it was a memento. If I did, I wouldn't have ripped it
もう
apart.
いいです。終わったことですから。
It's fine, no use digging up the
よく
past.
ないわ。私が自分を許せない。
It isn't. I'm honestly ashamed with
じゃ
myself.
あ、どうするんですか？
What are you going to do about it then? Higa retorted.
償いをするわ。
I'll atone for my mistake.
償い？
Atone?
ついてきなさい。あんたの悩み、なくしてあげる。
Follow me, I'll get rid of your suffering.
ちょっと。
Hold on. Leland left the room, Higa's bags in hand. She didn't even return the notebook. Higa ran after her, probably worried that she wouldn't be able to get her stuff back otherwise. What are you going to do? I followed after them and asked. I had an inkling, but wanted to confirm it regardless. I was spot on.
魔法を使うわ。
I'm going to use magic. We headed home. Higa cautiously followed behind us. At times she slowly looked over to Leland, as if to gauge her expression, only to shrug defeatedly.
聞き間違いだと思うんだけど、さっき魔法って言ってなかった？
I might have just heard wrong, but did she say something about magic earlier? Higa and I were forced to wait in the living room while Leland set things up. Higa looked uncomfortable. How do I break it to her? Leland hadn't used any magic while Higa was staying with us. I guess she wanted to keep it a secret, but despite that she suddenly announced that she'd be using it. I guess the embargo was lifted, and without any prior warning to boot. Was that what she meant by atoning?
話せないことなら無理に言わなくていいよ。
You don't have to say anything if you can't. No, I was just thinking of how to word it. Could I just give you a quick summary?
うん。
Sure. Leland's a witch.
冗
Silence.
談だよね。
You're joking, right? Not at all. You'll find out soon.
怖いこと言わないで。
You're scaring me. It'll be alright. Nothing bad will come of it, I hope.
多分なんだ。そこは自信を持って言ってほしかったな。
You hope? It would be nice if you were a little more confident about all this. This conversation felt familiar. Leland never told us what she'd do in advance. There was always something new whenever her magic was involved.
光る。比嘉を連れて部屋に来て。
Hikaru, bring Higa over. Everything was ready. We headed toward the study, and just like last time, it had been set up like a shrine. Hanging scrolls with ritual prayers written on them were placed in the 4 cardinal directions. The low tea table was being used as an altar, tap water was standing in for holy water, and a lit candle was our sacred torch. There was also the pile of books where we would place our offering, which as usual was a pile of chicken.
何?
What's all this? Higa looked dubious upon seeing the mountain of poultry. I wouldn't be able to explain it to her if I tried. I just talked it all up to magic. I think it'd be a good idea to let her know what you're gonna do. I directed her attention to Leland, who
魔
nodded.
法は大きく2種類に大別されるわ。私が普段使うような魔道具や簡易な魔法陣で力を発現させるもの。
Magic is generally split into 2 main categories. I regularly use the type that manifests certain magical items in simple summoning
それ
circles.
から力あるものと契約を交わし、高度な魔法を借り受けるもの。
The other involves entering a contract with the beings of power and borrowing their advanced magical abilities.
何を言っているのかわからないんですけど。
Everything you're saying makes absolutely no sense to me. Leland held her hand out with her palm facing up. Suddenly, a ball of fire manifested before Higa.
今、あんたの目の前に浮かばせたのが前者。
What you just saw was
である指輪を使って炎を作り出したの。
What you just saw was an example of the former. I created flames using a magical item, in this case my ring.
魔法には属性があって、火、水、風、土は魔力さえあれば比較的容易に行使できる。
There are several elements you can control relatively easily as long as you have the mana for it, like fire, water, wind, and earth.
けれど、属性は他にもあって、神の数だけ存在してる。
But there are many others with numbers matching those of the gods.
特に有名なのは光と闇で、私は闇に連なる夜の魔法に特化してるわ。
The most well-known
魔女。
The most well-known elements are light and dark, and I specialize in night magic, an extension of dark magic. That's why I'm a witch. Leland pulled up the pendant hanging around her neck for us to see. The Jurgen emblem. It was an accessory that served as proof of Leland's status as a witch and wasn't magical. On the other hand, anyone who possessed one in her hometown were avoided. Were avoided, so to some degree it was cursed.
今の炎は本物で、ということは魔法も本物？
So those flames are real and magic really does exist?
そう。
That's right. Leland produced some water from her palms next as if flaunting her abilities. While it seemed gimmicky, it was far from a cheap party trick.
人間では行使できない魔法も数多くあるの。そうした魔法は神々とその眷属のような力ある者のみが扱える高度なもの。
But there are also many forms of magic we can't use. They're so advanced that only the beings of power who are close to the gods can control
けれど
them.
人間は対価を支払い、力ある者と交渉することで、そうした魔法を借り受けることができる。
But if we offer them something of equal value in exchange for their services, we can strike a deal with them and borrow their magical
も
power.
ちろん、呼び出した者によって借り受けられる魔法の種類に制限があるわ。
Obviously, our options are limited depending on which being we call upon.
以前、私は夜の眷属を召喚した。おそらくだけど、 今回も呼びかけに応じてくる可能性が高い。
Let's see, last time we summoned a being of night magic. It's just a hunch, but I have a feeling that it will probably show up this time around too.
だから、それを見越して、ある程度、強大な魔法を要求する予定。
With that in mind, I plan on requesting some pretty high level magic. I couldn't quite understand Leland's explanation, but regardless, I had a feeling it'd be really dangerous. There was always risk in getting involved with something so powerful. Will we be
成
okay?
功させないと使えないくらいの魔法だもの。ダメでも呼ぶしかないわ。
This is magic that we can't use unless we summon them. We have to try even if we don't get the results we want. It was more serious than I thought. What exactly did she intend to
一
do?
応、あんたたちには害が及ばないよう配慮するわ。
It'll be fine. I'll be careful so no harm comes to you two. Okay. Despite my doubts, the ritual began. Leland sat down at the door and began her incantations in a low voice that reverberated through the room. A string of words in a language that clearly wasn't Japanese filled the air. Higa and I watched everything unfold from a safe distance. The room began to tremble in rhythm to Leland's chanting. Soon after, the interior of the room began to look hazy and dim. We could feel a slight chill flowing out into the corridor. Last time, this stage was when the summoning was complete. In other words, the inhuman thing had manifested in the unoccupied room.
ノートを。
Give me the notebook. Leland firmly demanded the memento Higa held so dearly. Higa looked at me, obviously reluctant. I nodded to her and she did as Leland asked. Leland placed it on a silver tray and pushed the two items into the room. As she did, the atmosphere changed. A black liquid-like substance dropped from the ceiling onto the book, coating it completely. This was my second time seeing this, but I still felt the same fear upon seeing the strange substance. Higa grabbed my hand. I squeezed hers back. Everything went silent. This was around the time when the candle went out and the ritual ended last time. This time, though, it was different. A black, hazy mist enveloped the room. It was so dense that it even blocked off the light coming from the candle. We heard what seemed like moaning, or was it murmuring? Sounds resembling a human voice emerged from the fog. I couldn't contain my curiosity any longer. Well, what's going
見ていれ
on?
ばわかるわ。日が、前に来て、中を見なさい。
You'll know when you see it. Higa stepped forward and looked into the room. Higa's shoulders trembled upon being called. She was clearly frightened, but she still moved up to peer into the mist.
何も見えません。
I don't see anything.
見えるわ。よく見て。
It's definitely there. Look closer. I strained my eyes from behind. All I saw was a black mist. It gathered to form a sort of strange pattern. Whispers came from within. Both grew in intensity. The first thing I made out was a person's face. The fog coalesced into a humanoid figure. It had a petite build. Its back was bent. This person looked quite elderly. They had a feminine aura as well. Who was she? I had no idea. Higa, on the other hand, seemed to recognize her.
嘘。そんなのありえない。
No way, there's just no way this is happening. Her expression was one of utter disbelief. She even surprised herself with that statement. She kept shaking her head in denial. The fog began to settle once the humanoid figure was more or less complete. Even from afar, I could tell they were elderly. Despite the body being made of mist, It was still able to make out the wrinkle. No, I was still able to make out the wrinkles on her face. The expression she wore mirrored Higa's. She seemed to struggle to speak from the shock. That voice, is that you, Tsumugi? The misty figure spoke. Higa's reaction was emotional. Yes, it's me, Grandma. It's Tsumugi. That can't be right. Higa's grandmother is no longer with
時
us.
間がないから手短に説明するわ。今、私は人ならざる者の力で比嘉義恵の魂を呼んだわ。
There's no time, so I'll cut to the chase. I'm using the inhuman thing's power to summon Yoshie Higa's spirit.
呼べるのは一度だけ。とどまっていられる時間も十数分。悔いのないように話しなさい。
I can only
比嘉はね。
I can only do this once, and it lasts around 10 minutes. Keep it short and make sure to tie up any loose ends, especially you, Higa. Leland grabbed Higa by the shoulder and shot her a firm look.
あんたには確認しなきゃいけないことがある。そうでしょ。
There's one thing in particular you need to talk to her about, right? If her promise to her grandmother was her source of suffering, then all we needed to do was to have her grandmother take it back. It was a simple solution. Her grandmother doesn't need to take it back. Her grandmother just needs to emphasize that she wanted Higa to do as she wanted to do and such. Just live a happy life. Anyone could have come up with that. It's obvious that Leland had arrived at that conclusion too. And she went so far as to call upon Yoshie's spirit to make it happen. This was absolutely crazy. My dear Tsumugi, why are you crying? I mean, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I was called over so suddenly, I'm having some trouble understanding what's going on
な
here.
らはっきり言うわ。比嘉義恵は半年前に死んだわ。ここにいるのはあなたの魂だけよ。
I'll give it to you straight. You, Yoshie Higa, passed away half a year ago. All that's left of you now is your soul. Higa was all choked up with tears, so Leland gave her grandmother the rundown in her stead. She explained Higa's string of failures in Naha, and how her job search wasn't going well here on Toyotoki Island either. Yoshie listened intently to the story, her eyes closed. Eventually she opened her mouth to speak, her words coming out slowly like droplets of water. How awful of me. I sure didn't think things would turn out that way.
けれど、事実。あんたのせいでこうなった。
To be frank, this was all your fault. I don't agree with you, Leland. The fault lies with Higa and the communication lines. And Higa's understanding of it.
おばあちゃんのせいじゃないよ。
It isn't your fault, Grandma. Higa finally faced her.
私に能力がなかったから。それだけなの。だから失敗ばかりしてこんな風になって。
I didn't have what it takes, that's all. That's why I keep failing and why it turned out like this. I don't think that at all. Yoshie cut her off. Whenever things don't end well, you just need to try again. You've gotten all up in your head, dear. Oh, I agree with the grandma here.
それじゃあ立派な仕事なんてできないよ。
But then I won't be able to find an upstanding job. There's absolutely no need for that. You see, I wanted to encourage you, but I never wanted you to do anything you didn't want to. She firmly refuted Higa's claims. That was the only way to lift her curse. Higa was visibly shaken at having her beliefs torn down by the very person who put them in place to begin with.
でも、私、おばあちゃんにお金だってもらったし。
But I got all that money from you and everything. It was for you to use as you wished. If I'm remembering this correctly, it was for tuition fees, right? Yeah. Hika nodded once before shaking her head.
あのね、本当のことを言うね。私、騙されたの。おばあちゃんにもらったお金。
Actually, no.
人に取られちゃったの。
Actually, no. To tell you the truth, I was tricked. Your hard-earned money was taken by scammers. And I don't entirely blame you here, Samugi, for falling for it. You just need to learn from the mistake. Ignorance is not an excuse for a lot of things, yeah, but this is a mistake that she can easily recover from.
あんなにたくさんもらったのに、私は何にもなれなかったの。それを知られるのが怖くて、嫌で、おばあちゃんに連絡しなくて。
You gave it all to me, but I've got nothing to show for it. I was so scared to tell you I cut off all contact.
あんなことになるなんて思ってなかったから。
I didn't think things would end up this way. Samuki rambled her words, pouring out like a dam broke. As she spoke, all of her regrets surfaced and she started sobbing. She balled her fists so tightly that they turned pale. Her shoulders were trembling and her forehead was against the corridor wall. Her voice was shaking as she squeezed out a sincere apology.
こんなにしてもらったのに、全部無駄になって。
You've done so much for me, but it was all for nothing. No. You've done so much for me, but it was all for nothing. I'm so sorry. Yoshie was rendered speechless. She saw her words of encouragement for Higa, which she shared with the best of intentions, became shackles that doomed her to fail. So she made sure to speak in an unwavering, steadfast tone. She resolved to lift her granddaughter's curse. What you did with the money I gave you was entirely up to you. You have nothing to be sorry for.
私、失敗したんだよ。おばあちゃんに期待してもらったのに、お金ももらったのに。
But I felt so miserably. I didn't meet any of your expectations, even though you gave me so much money for them. It's really not a big deal.
嘘だよ。私のせいでおばあちゃんは。
You're lying. It's my fault that you... It's not your fault. Yoshie spoke firmly. She repeated a few times, really driving it in. It was just my time. I'm certain of it. The fact that you weren't there must have been a work of fate. You don't have to worry about a thing.
どうして怒らないの？
Why aren't you upset with me? There's no need to be. When you've lived as long as I have, you see lots of people who failed over and over. I knew someone whose company fell apart and their family left. Their house was seized, and so they had to fish for their own food, but they seemed happy. Yoshie smiled. It was as if to say that Higa's failures were nothing compared to what she'd seen throughout the years. We just needed to take a good look around us, to see that the world was full of people's mistakes. And if we were to compare ourselves to whoever made those blunders in the world, it would seem as if ours were never mistakes to begin with.
そんな話されても、よくわかんないよ。
Despite all you said, I still don't really get it. And that's fine. Anything goes in life. My one and only wish is for you to enjoy it, that's all. Everyone has a different view on what an upstanding person really is. There's just no point in comparing yourself to others. You, like everyone else, are just trying to live. There's no right or wrong to it. The rich may be able to live lavishly, but that's the end of it. People are meant to help, and to be helped, and at some point along the way, the entire process becomes enjoyable. That's just life. She smiled softly. Rather than an attempt to encourage Higa, it truly seemed to be an expression that came naturally to her as she spoke.
なんだか意外。おばあちゃん、そんな風に考えてたんだ。
I'm really su-
厳しく生きてるのかと思ってた。
I'm really surprised to hear that, Grandma. I didn't know you saw it that way. I thought you were always super hard on yourself. I never thought too hard about anything. That way of life might just work for you too. But if you do have any ambitions, by all means go for it. But if not, there's no need to push so hard. It's honestly fine either way. Higa nodded slowly as if to really absorb her words.
ありがとう。今度はその約束、きっと守るよ。
Okay. Thank you. I'll be sure to keep our promise this time. Oh no, I'm not asking you to promise me anything. Just forget about me and enjoy life as you please.
忘れないよ。
I couldn't do that. Higa's words were forceful.
私はおばあちゃんのこと、絶対に忘れたりしない。
I'll never forget you, Grandma. I couldn't. Hearing you say that is making me all sentimental. I was truly happy with you, dear.
私もだよ。おばあちゃんと一緒に暮らせて幸せだった。あの時に戻れたらいいって思う。
Me too. I loved living with you. I wish we could turn back time so we could be together again. That's just not possible. I'm gone now, so Umugi, I hope you can find happiness. Be sure to eat and sleep well. Live a healthy life. There's nothing I can really do in this state, but I'll be praying for your happiness. Leland stirred. She shot a look toward both Higa and her grandmother. Time was up. Has it really been 10 minutes already? Even I was shocked at how short that felt.
私、おばあちゃんに会えないまま別れたのが本当に悔しくて、自分を許せなかった。
I was
だから
in
会えてよかった。
I was in so much pain being unable to see you before you died, and I couldn't forgive myself. I'm so glad we got to see each other again. I feel the same way. Yoshie tried to reach for Higa's head, but she couldn't get past the invisible wall between the room and the corridor. It was a barrier that separated the living from the dead. Despite being unable to touch each other, they both got as close to the barrier as they could. The dead could never return. Higa would never be able to be with her grandmother again. This was their final goodbye. So this was their last opportunity to speak to each other.
おばあちゃん、ありがとう。大好きだったよ。
Thank you, Grandma. I love you. Her fingertips scratched the floorboards as she cried. The tears that fell down her cheeks stained her pretty blouse. She bit her lip as she cast her eyes down and wept.
顔を上げなさい。
Look up. Leland spoke to her from
たった
behind.
一人の家族でしょ。きちんと見送りなさい。
She's the only family you had left, right? Be sure to see her off properly. Really? She wiped her tears and lifted her head. She held her gaze as the black mist slowly began to fade. In respect for the deceased, Higa watched as the ritual came to an end. In a sense, it was probably similar to watching the smoke rising from a crematorium. Samugi, thank you. Yoshie's Her voice sounded more and more distant. The outline of her body also began to fade into the mist. Higa suddenly stood up.
行かないで。私を置いて行かないで。おばあちゃん
Please don't go. Don't leave me alone, Grandma. She reached out and her hand easily crossed the threshold. The invisible wall was gone. The mysterious presence in the room had also disappeared. All that was left was the rearranged study. The smell of dust once again settled on the darkened room. There were no traces of the miracle that had just taken place. It was a regular room, nothing unusual about it.
おばあちゃん
Grandma,
ヨシエはもういないわ。あんたは一人よ。
she's not here anymore. You're on your own now. Leland spoke harshly. Don't be so hard on her. She lost a family member. What she needs to hear now, though, Hikaru, is the truth. And for her to let out all her grief right now.
いいよ。今のはリルーちゃんが正しい。
It's fine. Leland's right. Higa spoke quietly as she wiped her tears.
大丈夫だから。
I'll be okay. Really?
むしろ大丈夫でなければならないのよ。
If anything, you have to be okay.
私は前に進まないといけないんだ。
You're right. I need to move
進め
on.
るとは限らないけどね。
Whether you can is a different story,
そ
though.
れでも進もうとしないといけないんだと思う。
Even so, it's something I need to do. The exchange filled me with equal amounts of both hope and doubt. Would Higa really be okay on her own? The notebook which was set on the tray earlier had disappeared at some point. It must have been the item we exchanged during the ritual. It supported Higa all this time.
本当にありがとうございます。この恩はきっと返します。
Thank you so much. I'll be sure to return the favor.
別にいいわ。償いだもの。
Don't worry about it. I wanted to atone.
必ず返しますから。
No, I definitely will. Higa declared confidently. The doubts slowly led up as my hope grew. I decided to pray for her success. At the very least, the curse had been lifted. I was sure she'd be fine from then on, even without the notebook. It was June. The rainy season in Okinawa ended before mainland Japan had even begun. We continuously got sunny weather. The skies were blue and large clouds floated by overhead. The fronts of cafes began to be decorated with flags advertising shaved ice. Even the empty entertainment districts were now full of life. Summer had its own slew of battles. Hotel reservations were through the roof. Last month had been nothing compared to how busy we were now. It was crazy to think that we were a month away from peak season. Naturally, I got fewer and fewer days off. For one of them, I invited Akari over to Hisaku Island.
暑いですね。まったく。何ですか？急に呼び出して。
Gee, it's scorching hot. Why did you call me out of the blue in this heat? We're getting ice cream.
はあ？アイス食べにわざわざ隣の島まで呼び出されたんですか？
Excuse me? You called me to the next island over just for some ice cream? Yeah, let's
見
go.
すぎません。あかりのこと何だと思ってるんですか？
You demon, how little do you think of me? I'm leaving you behind.
ちょっと待ってください。
Hey, hold on, wait for me. We proceeded to walk around the island for about an hour.
西目さん、あれじゃないですか？
Isn't that it, Nishime? Akari pointed toward a large sugarcane field. There was a mobile store that stood out in the green expanse. The stall, with its umbrella and banner fluttering about, slowly made its way down the main road. The cart seemed to have a freezer and generator packed in the back. It was just like one of the stalls you'd see at a festival, save for the fact that it required someone to manually move it around. Hello? I called after it. The cart stopped and the lady pulling it looked over her shoulder at us.
西目くんとあかりちゃん、来てくれたんだ。
Oh, Nishime Akari, you came. Of course, we had to when we heard you were working at an ice cream shop. The lady working at the stall is none other than Higa. The blouse of her work uniform looked perfect for summer. Still, despite that, I figured a job that involved pulling a stall would warrant a more casual look.
一ついいでしょうか。
Can I say something? Akari raised her hand.
西目さんに付き合わされてアイスを食べに来たのは良かったのですが、まさか移動しているとは思いもしませんでした。
Nishime dragging me out to get ice cream is all fine and dandy, but I didn't think the shop itself
美
moved.
少女を炎天下の中、こんなに歩かせるとは非常に罪深い行いですよ。
Forcing a cutie like me to trek all over the island under the blazing sun is a crime punishable by death. Well, I still want to punch you in the face, Akari.
ということで、あかりの凄まじい苦労に免じて、アイスの一つや二つはおごりということにしてくれてもいいと思うんですが、東さんそのあたりどう思いますか？
That said, I believe I'm more than deserving of a freebie or two for my hardship. Wouldn't you agree, Higa? No. You're being dumb, just buy your own. I delivered a swift chop to her
ちょ
head.
っとした冗談ですよ。もう何でもいいからアイスをください。
I'm just kidding.
そうです。
I'm just kidding. I'll take anything, so could I get one, please? I'm so hot I could melt. If you're hot right now, it's best to eat spicy food and drink room temperature water, not do ice cream. But of course, this could just be an emotional thing too, that the ice cream could help with, but that's generally the case. You want spicy food and more room temperature water when you're hot.
何味にしますか？
What flavor would you
お
like?
すすめで。
Whatever you recommend. There were 3 flavors on the board. Despite the lack of variety, they changed daily. It was a smart tactic to encourage customers to return. Akari got a double scoop with 2 of them, so I chose the 3rd. Higa took cups from a cardboard box and scooped up the gelato from the freezer with a spatula. After a few precise movements, it was ready to be served.
ちょっとだけおまけしておいたよ。
Here you go, I gave you a little extra.
さすがわかってますね。
Ooh, I like the way you think. I handed over some money. I ended up paying for Akari's portion after all. It was quite pricey compared to your typical ice cream, but the care put into the presentation made up for it. It looked delicious too. Mommy, I want ice cream. A family came along, probably after seeing us get our scoops. Higa proceeded to walk the child through all the flavors. Good luck then, thanks for the ice cream. We parted ways, not wanting to get in the way of Higa's work. When I looked back, I saw the child happily eating the gelato. The mother thanked Higa. While it was a simple job, there was a lot to be said for Higa's success. I left, relief welling in my chest. And thus, Higa began working at a gelato store. She pulled her cart around the island every day. She looked right at home and conducted business in a positive and bright manner. Her curse had been lifted ever since the day she spoke to her grandmother face to face. She was now able to do all the things she couldn't before. There was still the occasional slip-up, like not being able to tell right from left, but she was working hard to build up her confidence. She turned over a completely new leaf compared to when she was strictly adhering to the teachings in her notebook. Gone were her unrealistic job expectations. Her goal, to become an upstanding person who could do anything, took on a different form. She would start with a job that suited her, then work her way up from there. It was a much more natural way of going about things. The shackles holding her back were now gone, and her smile shone brighter as a result. Her soothing air returned, and she seemed more charming than ever. This quality of hers, combined with her natural friendliness, was on full display now that she was in the service industry. It was her calling. On the other hand, there was still one last thing I needed to take care of. Leland. She held Tiga with her magic. Almost everything worked out in the end thanks to her efforts. But there were still some loose ends. Ones that had to do with me. Here's your food. Thanks. Akari hadn't been coming over lately, so our dinners were pretty awkward. It's just the two of us, and for the most part we ate in silence. I'd only ever really seen this kind of chilly environment on TV. Do you really have nothing to say? Cold words were flung at me the moment I reached for my food, reflexively frozen in terror. No, I reflexively froze in terror. But I couldn't end things here. Everything fell apart precisely because I chose to remain silent. I'm really sorry about what happened. I should have been the one to take care of it. What are you talking about? I mean, you know, with you tearing apart Higa's notebook and everything. That should have been my responsibility to bear. The only way to fix Higa's over-dependence on the notebook was to take it away from her. Despite knowing this, I didn't do a thing. So Leland was forced to step in instead. I just really didn't like her, that's why I ripped it up. That can't be true. It is, she pissed me off. I see. If that were the case, then why did she say she wouldn't have touched it if she knew it was a memento? But there was no point in drilling her if she was adamantly refusing to acknowledge it. But anyway, why are we talking about this? I just wanted to point out how you didn't say thanks for the meal like you're supposed to. Huh? That was what she meant? You were the one who told me, weren't you? It's an ironclad rule. That's right. I did say something like that. After all was said and done, things were no longer awkward between us. Leland, thank you for being so understanding, truly. The choices don't have an impact on the story. You can skip without any consequences. Alright, let's do save. And let me check on the time again. I've been checking consistently just to make sure of things, but want to make sure things are good, and they are. So, we've got only two choices to go ahead or read the self-help book, and we've got enough time, so let's go ahead and see what these books are like. Or how to read them, I should say.
自己啓発本？私も読みますわよ。
Self-help books, yes, I read them as well. I asked Goldilocks about them one day. I bumped into her while I was hanging out at the gelato stall. She visited with her butler until Oh, that's surprising to hear, since you don't seem like the type to have trouble deciding things for yourself.
当然、自分で決めましたよ。本に書いてあることは、成功した人の行動であって、成功する行動ではありませんもの。
Of course I don't. Just because the books are written by successful people doesn't necessarily mean that the methods themselves guarantee success. I guess that's true.
私は成功者の熱意を知るためにそうした本を読むんですの。
I read these books to understand the author's passion and
いず
zeal.
れの本を読んでも成功した人というのはポジティブで活気にあふれ、何より努力の量が凄まじい。
And throughout all the books I've read, I've noted their positivity, enthusiasm, and effort. So in other words, being positive guarantees success? Not necessarily. Being realistic is better than being positive.
まさか読み取れるのはあくまでポジティブな人が成功したという事実だけ。そこに因果はありませんわ。
Not at all. All we can glean from that is the fact that positive people have been successful. It certainly doesn't explain why they were.
論理的に導かれる結論なんて、そうした本には書いてないも同然でしたよ。
Although it's only natural that these books wouldn't have logical answers to that. I'm understanding less and less why you read them.
その人の生き様を想像し、自身を奮い立てるために読むんですのよ。
I do it to picture their way of life and use those anecdotes as a source of
少
inspiration.
なくとも著者と同程度の努力はすべきだと自分に言い聞かせていますわ。
At the very least, I read them to tell myself to put in the same amount of effort as the authors. I see. I guess everyone had different ways of approaching them. As I stared at Goldilocks in awe, Higa chimed in, saying that it was just like
アニ
anime.
メも主人公が頑張ってたら自分も頑張らなきゃって思いますし。
When I see the protagonists doing their best, it makes me feel like I need to work hard
そうで
too.
すわね。何に力を分けてもらうかは人それぞれですわ。
Yes, that's exactly it. There are many sources from which we can find empowerment. Goldilocks responded kindly and patiently to Higa's innocent statement. It was hard to tell who is the real adult here. Okay. Kind of funny that they bring this up, but I'm gonna save it again. Darn it, no. Wrong thing. Save. Alright, save here. Oh, caught my blunder there, but I caught myself just in time. Okay, we've already done the self-help book, so let's go to the next section. Smoogie. When things had more or less settled down, I went to visit Granny. The assisted living facility was within walking distance of my new apartment. It's been a while. Oh, it's been a while.
久しぶり。ちょっと間が空いちゃったね。
It has. Sorry I didn't visit for so long. I returned Granny's smile. Well, it probably wasn't very convincing. I came to tell her I was sorry. I wanted to apologize for deceiving her all this time. For pretending to be her granddaughter. I wanted to because I was able to meet my actual grandmother. Ever since I saw Grandma again, I never even thought to go see Granny anymore. Why would I? The hole in my heart had been filled. Looking back on it, my relationship with her was nothing but a selfish fabrication. I had been deceiving myself until now, but I couldn't ignore reality any longer. The fact of the matter was, I was using her as a substitute for Grandma. I projected all of my regrets onto her. Wanting to make Granny happy was a facade. In the end, it was all for my own self-satisfaction. I even took advantage of her dementia. This had to end. It was an insult to both Granny and her real granddaughter. So I stood my resolve. I decided to apologize directly. What's wrong? Why the long face?
今日は大切な話があって。
Well, I actually have something important to tell you. Is that so? A shadow of uncertainty fell across her face. I hesitated and ended up broaching a completely different topic.
夏の間は仕事が忙しくなりそうで、前ほどは来られなくなるかも。
Yeah, I'll probably be really busy with work this summer. I don't think I'll be able to visit as often. Really? That's too bad. I couldn't bring it up. Considering her condition, the fact that I wasn't who I said I was might not even get through to her. What was the best way to approach this? Telling her the truth would just make her sad, wouldn't it? A flurry of emotions welled up in my chest. You know, I actually have something to discuss with you myself. Granny spoke up while I was lost in thought. What is it? You aren't my real granddaughter, are you? Ah, so she brought it up herself. That's kind of interesting. Huh? I actually thought so for quite a while now. I mean, you don't even appear at all in my memories from long ago, and I remember my past very, very well. Granny roared with laughter. Meanwhile, I couldn't say a thing. But despite that, you went along with me, didn't you? You pretended you were. You did all that so you wouldn't hurt my feelings.
そうじゃないよ。私は。
But that's not true. It's fine. No matter what your reasons were. She cut me off before I could object. I truly enjoyed your visits. They filled me with joy. That's why I couldn't bring myself to say anything. It felt like my actual granddaughter was visiting. But you're going to be busy from now on, right? So be free. Don't you worry about having to go along with this random stranger any longer.
おばあちゃん。
Granny. Tears streamed down my face. They fell and stained the bed sheets. But I couldn't just sit here feeling sorry for myself.
謝らないといけないの。私もおばあちゃんが本当のおばあちゃんじゃないって分かってて話をしてたから。
I have to apologize to you too. I knew you weren't my real grandmother, but I still treated you like you were. Why, is that so? What a kind girl you are.
そうじゃない。そうじゃないよ。
I'm not kind at all. Don't feel pressured to talk about it. I'm just happy you came by. Granny held my hand. I could feel the warmth and kindness in her hands, which were wrinkled and from age.
ありがとう。私もね、おばあちゃんといっぱい話ができて楽しかった。
Thank you.
そうだよ。
Thank you. I also enjoyed talking to you, Granny. I really did. That was the truth. I only managed to make it this far with the help of many different people. Everyone treated me kindly and warmly. I failed miserably a countless number of times. I was even betrayed and deceived. But the world wasn't full of bad eggs. I was also surrounded by just as many, if not more, amazing people. I hoped one day I could become someone like Grandma and Granny. If it didn't matter if I was upstanding or not anymore. I would much rather be kind. At some point I ended up crying and Granny continued to hold my hand until I settled down. But our special moment came to an abrupt end. There was a knock at the door. I'm changing right now, hold on. Granny called out to the person behind the door without missing a beat. It was a clever cover-up. If only her dementia could be fixed like that too. What timing, it seems like my son's come to visit.
私はもう行くよ。
Okay then, I'll get going. If you'd like, you're free to come again.
来るよ。必ず。
I definitely will. If I get all confused again, make sure to remind me that you aren't my granddaughter, alright? Granny said so half-jokingly. I like to think that I was able to respond with a smile. I left the room to see a middle-aged man standing by the door. His eyebrows resembled Granny's. I expected him to angrily question me, considering I was a stranger who was just in his mother's room. Instead, he spoke to me as if he knew exactly who I was. Oh, you must be her. A boy came in the other day mentioning that a woman had been visiting my mother. It seemed like he was looking for you. Have you met up with him? I assumed that was when I left his house. Hikaru must have searched high and low for me.
会えました。
Yes, I have. That's good to hear. Also, thank you very much.
何がでしょう。
For what exactly? My mother's been in high spirits thanks to your visits. If it isn't too much trouble, could you continue to come by every now and
い
then?
いんですか？お邪魔しても。
Is that really okay? Of course, and we'll be sure to repay the favor.
そんな、平気ですよ。
Oh no, you don't need to do that. We do. We're truly grateful to you. The man didn't budge. I left after exchanging contact information. I promised Granny I'd come see her again. Not as her granddaughter, but as a friend. The humid air caressed my cheeks as soon as I stepped outside. The cicadas chirped loudly. It must have rained while I was inside. There was a large rainbow in the eastern sky. Summer had definitely arrived. Hikaru, it was 6 p.m., right around sunset. Hikari came over just as I was bringing in the laundry.
洗濯なんてしてる場合じゃないですよ。お財布の準備はいいですか？極めて当たり前のことですが、キャッシュレス払いはできませんよ。
Nishime, this is no time for laundry. I hope your wallet's ready. It's super obvious, but no one takes credit. Hey, card over here. Man alive. You really are spoiled if you think credit card will get you anywhere. I don't even have one. Also, why are we meeting up here again?
現地だと合流できないかもしれないじゃないですか。
Because we might not even be able to find each other over there.
さては西目さん、小さな島だと思って舐めていますね。
Nishime,
祭りだけは混雑しますからね。
Nishime, you're totally not taking this seriously just because it's a small island, aren't you? The summer festival gets super packed. Akari rambled excitedly. If it wasn't clear enough already, we were all going to the summer festival. It was Akari's idea, and everyone who frequented our home agreed to it. This is my first time attending a festival as a group. I'm pretty stoked.
東京にいた頃は行かなかったんですか？
Oh, did you not go while you were in Tokyo? I didn't have any friends who were willing to. Also, are you sure you don't want to go with your islander
あ
friends?
かりの友達は隣の島に住んでる子ばかりですから。
They all live on different islands,
お
so...
待たせ。
Sorry to keep you waiting. Higa, who had been cleaning out her late grandmother's house, also joined us. It would have been close if she'd met us at the festival, but she came over anyway. Her chest bounced up and down as she ran. Ah, what a blessed day. Let's see. Yeah, blessed day. We began to head over, Akari leading the way. After walking for 10 minutes or so, we arrived at the lot in front of the city hall. While the tents had been folded last week, they were now fully assembled, housing people selling food and alcohol. There were ropes with lanterns hanging from them, decorating the venue. They really gave a festive atmosphere. In Tokyo, many of the young women wore yukatas to the festivals, but here everyone was in their regular, everyday clothing. While subtle, it really highlighted the difference in culture. Were there always so many people on this island?
祭りに合わせて里帰りしている人もいますからね。
There are plenty
声のない顔が混じっているのはそのためです。
There are plenty of people who return home just for the festival, so you'll definitely be seeing some unfamiliar faces. I grunt vaguely in response, despite not being able to distinguish the visitors from the residents to begin with. I was still being treated as an outsider after all, so I didn't really interact with the residents much. Attention please. Pardon the interruption despite the festival being well underway, but we'd like to take the time to introduce the festival organizers. A clear voice echoed throughout the lot. I turned toward where it was coming from and saw that there was a stage in front of the city hall. It is smaller than the ones you'd find in school gyms. Toyotoki Summer Festival is written on a board toward the back, and some blue tarp was installed acting as a roof for the stage. First off, here's the island mayor with his opening address. The announcer handed the microphone over to a middle-aged man. I couldn't see his face very well from where I was standing, but if he was the island mayor, then it must be Akari's dad. As he began his speech, Akari put her hands up to her ears. What are you doing?
これは身内が公の場で話すのを聞くのが恥ずかしいので、なるべく聞かないようにしているあかりちゃんです。
It's embarrassing seeing him talk as a government official, so I'm trying to block him out as much as
何も
possible.
聞こえないので、以後自動返答モードに入ります。
I
身
can't
内が公の場で、
hear a thing, so this message will be repeated. It's embarrassing seeing him talk. You're being a lot more embarrassing than he is. Next, we have the youth representative, Kiriko Kunsanden, a girl who took the mayor's place at the microphone. She was in her usual pink dress. That was Goldilocks, alright. She smiled widely toward the crowd and read her script in a clear, resounding voice. Hey, Goldilocks is
各
up.
世代の代表者でスピーチをして、テープカットするんですよ。
Once the generational representatives finish their respective speeches, they'll cut the ribbon.
去年まであかりがやってましたが、今年は西目さんたちと祭りを回るので、キリコに譲ることにしました。
I've been
嬉しそう
doing
に
it
してましたよ。
I've been doing it every year until the last, but I wanted to walk around with you guys, so I left it to Kiriko. She seemed super happy about it. Well, she does seem to like these things. I took her explanation at face value. They were just about to wrap up with the speeches. At the moderator's signal, the ribbon was cut, and the festival officially began. Well, only officially, as the vendors were welcoming customers for quite some time already. The fathers walked around with beer in one hand. The four of us wandered for a while, browsing through the stalls. The vendors all knew either Higa or Akari and gave us a ton of free stuff. Leland and I also reaped the benefits just by tagging along. It's all about the connections here. The item Leland ended up buying had a very self-explanatory title, Toyotoki Snacks. It definitely seemed like a bang for your buck, considering how cheap it was and how much there was, but it was hard to tell what was inside. They looked like fried balls of dough with sugar sprinkled on top. Isn't that soda? And
西目さん、それは言わない約束ですよ。
Ishime, you aren't supposed to say that. Upon coming to that realization, Akari shot me down with a word of warning.
かわいいね。
Oh, this is cute. Higa picked up a handmade keychain. It had a yellow body and leaves stuck out of its head. It was a familiar design.
トヨトッキーって言うんだ。
It looks like a hairy banana. That was super suggestive. Could they really sell something like that in public? I gawked at the accessory when the guy behind the counter punched my shoulder and told me to get my mind out of the gutter. He looked mad. I forced myself to stop thinking about it. After we completed a lap around the stalls, we came across Goldilocks. It was her, if her red face was any indication, she definitely seemed really upset. Akatsumi, I finally found you. I can't believe you did that to me. What's wrong? What did I do? Let's see. Your shirt gall is unbelievable. And after you left me all alone too. Weren't you supposed to be waiting for me by the stage stairs after the ribbon cutting ceremony? You know, the exact same spot where I waited for you after your speech every single year? I think that's a you thing, hey Kiriko. And that's kind of why I also feel like punching you in the face, but not as much as Akari. I see Akari stood Kiriko up. No wonder she was upset. How should I know? And come to think of it, I guess us bumping into each other there wasn't just a coincidence after all, huh?
あれだけ敵対的な言動をしておきながら、実はあかりのことが大好きで、一緒にお祭りを見て回りたくて仕方がないから待っていたと。そういうわけですか?
Despite your venomous words, you actually liked me and wanted to explore the festival grounds with me so badly that you came to pick me up all those times. Of course not! I think she's got you pegged, Kiriko. Goldilocks denied it flat out.
そう、いいじゃないですか。去年まではなんとなくキリコと一緒に回っていましたが、今年は趣向を変えてみましょう。
Okay, so why does it matter? I hung out with you every year until now, so let's change things up this year.
どうして祭りを見ても息が詰まって仕方ないですし、ここは一つ距離を取るのはどうでしょうか。
Walking around during the festival with an enemy is absolutely stifling, so why not keep our
あ
distance?
かりは西目さんたちと楽しく屋台を巡るので、キリコは一人でゆっくりと楽しんでいいですよ。
I'm gonna go have fun with Nishime and the others, so go kick up your heels and enjoy yourself. Grrr! Akari was the devil incarnate. Stop teasing her, she can just come along with us. I delivered a chop to her
西目
head.
さん、オンとオフは分けた方がいいですよ。いくらオーナーだからといって気を使う必要はありません。
Nishime, you need to turn off that subordinate mindset of yours. Just cause she's your boss doesn't mean you need to act that way outside of work. What are you talking about? We've actually been getting closer when you aren't around, you know? We even walked our dogs together and everything, right? Is she referring to that time that she made Hikaru walk her dog?
そうですわ。実は仲良しなんですの。
Indeed, we get along very, very well. Goldilocks linked her arms with mine. I wanted to lend her a hand, so it would have broken my spirit if she decided, and if she denied my claim. I was just so relieved things didn't go that way that it took me a few moments to notice the cushioning of her chest. Wait, isn't she a bit too close?
こいつあかりの見ていないところでなんとハレンチな
Ooh. How could you do something so scandalous behind my back?
あら悔しいんですの悔しいんですの
Oh, jealous, are you? Are you? Goldilocks pressed her chest against me even more. It was bigger than Akari's.
ちょうどいいあかり一度は人を殺してみたいと思っていたんです
Well, this is just perfect then. I've always wanted to know what it'd be like to kill someone. Akari lunged at Goldilocks. One of my arms was currently occupied, so I couldn't stop it even if I wanted to. I looked to Leland for help. You actually don't need any water to make this. Just need some egg into the dough and fry it. The trick is to do it slowly. Don't turn the heat up too high.
そうやって作るのね。
So that's how they're made. She was getting a recipe from an old lady. I guess she really liked those so-called Toyotoki snacks. Higa, meanwhile.
どこいなくなっちゃったよ
Where are you guys? Oh dear, I've lost them. She'd gotten lost.
西目さんこの際はっきりしてもらおうじゃないですか記入はダメですか
Mishime, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you one thing. Do you not like small boobs?
今度新しいデザートを作ることにした
Oh my
わ。
gosh.
なんだと思う？
And I just wanted to punch Akari there. Let's see what Leyland has to say. I've decided to try making a new dessert. You'll never guess what it is.
みんなどこ
Where are you guys? Oh gods, please lend me your strength. At some point in all that excitement, it grew late. The heat in the lot was nearly unbearable, and I was sweating buckets. We traded in some mysterious coupons for shaved ice. The brain freeze I got from eating too much had me rolling around on the ground. Elementary and junior high school-aged volunteers performed a dance routine on stage. There was yet another performance held by the Women's Association. A famous local band also played some songs at some point. Time really does fly when you're having fun. Before we knew it, it was well into the night.
あかりたちはセパタクロー大会に出てきます
The three of us are entering the Sepak Takraw tournament. Akari headed toward the stage with Leland and Goldilocks. They're gonna play kick volleyball in skirts. I saw them off despite my doubts. Once Akari was out of sight, I leaned against a wall nearby. The ocean breeze passed through the venue. It felt wonderful. My excitement from the festival quickly evaporated as calm settled over me.
西目くんこっち
Mishime, over here. Higa led me by the hand. I obediently followed her. We left the crowds behind. It seemed like we were headed back toward the village. Where could she be taking me?
着いたよ
We're here. We arrived at a residential area with pretty lighting. Electric lanterns were spaced evenly along the road. Despite it not being anything out of the ordinary, the tall trees around them made the place seem otherworldly. From where we were standing, the path looked like it went on forever and ever. It almost felt like there'd be a different dimension lying at the end if we continued onward. This might have been the first time I saw such a pretty man-made wonder here on Toyotoki
でし
Island.
ょ私も初めて見たとき感動したんだ
Isn't it beautiful? I was really entranced by it. No, I was really entranced by it the first time I saw it too. Did you come here with your grandma?
そうだよ塞ぎ込んでた私の手を引いてくれたの今日は人がいるけどね
I
明
did.
日はもっと綺麗になるよ。
I did. She took me here by the hand when I was feeling down. There are people around today, but it'll be even prettier tomorrow. Tomorrow? Wasn't the festival only one
3
day?
日間あるんだよ。
It's 3 days long. That was the first I was hearing of this. All this commotion would last another 2 days, huh?
明日はね、生きがなしっていう儀式なの。一般の人は参加できないから家で待機。
Not quite. Tomorrow there will be a ritual called the Ikiganashi. Most people aren't allowed to take part, so they'll have to stay at
あ
home.
さってはお参りの日で、村のみんなで歌きに行って拝んでくるの。
After that is a day of worship. Everyone in the village will go to a sacred site in Utaki to pay their respects. Huh? Well, that wasn't any of my business. It's not like I was uninterested in history and all that, but I had some mixed feelings toward the rituals here on the island. I figured it'd be better to let sleeping dogs lie, or in this case, gods. I guess I'd better stay at home then.
暗くなったらね。儀式の様子は見ちゃダメだけど、街並みを見るくらいなら平気だよ。
Only when it gets dark. It's true that you can't see the ritual, but you can still walk around the village. I still will, just to be on the safe side. Didn't want to view the people here in an even worse light than I already did. There was a fireworks show to end the festival. We used our ever so convenient smartphones to meet up again. Iga and I went to the harbor. Since it took place on the coast, they could go really wild with the fireworks here. There were plenty of spots we could view them from. The most well-known was a park hall halfway up the mountain.
ね、変なことになっちゃって。
Sorry, things really spiraled there, didn't they? Not at all. It was a good experience. Afterwards, I participated in a sumo wrestling competition. The sport was a little different in Okinawa. For starters, it was called Shima. And instead of wearing next to nothing, the wrestlers wore judo uniforms. It also had a ring, but you didn't need to push your opponent out to win. All you had to do was get their back to the ground. I had a bit of judo experience from gym class. I got caught up in the moment and decided to enter, but lost to an experienced middle schooler in the first round. He is so experienced that despite flinging me to the ground, I was able to leave the ring unscathed.
今まで二人で何してたわけ？
What exactly were you two doing until now? Leland asked, still holding her precious Toyotoki snacks. We saw some pretty lights in the residential district after that. I was forced into a Shima tournament. Forced into it? You chose it!
何それ？全然わからない。
What's that? Never heard of it before. Well, that wasn't particularly surprising.
それより見て。かき氷を食べたら舌が緑色になったの。
Anyway, check this out. My tongue's all green from the shaved ice. She stuck it out. And there it was, her nicely shaped tongue dyed green with syrup. Within an arm's reach. She let her guard down too easily.
花火が始まる時刻ですわよ。
The fireworks are about to begin.
黒い夜に咲く大輪の花か。
Flowers blooming against the dark night sky, huh? Not bad at all. Goldilocks and Kanashiro waved. I didn't know they knew each other. Not to mention that he completely blended into the group. Of course they know each other! Kiriko helped with the escape. As I looked around wondering where Kari was, she arrived, a mountain of French fries in hand.
まったく、この超絶美少女あかりちゃんがじゃんけんで負けたくらいでパシリをしなければならないとは。
Sheesh, I can't believe the audacity of you making Ultimate Cutie Akari into an errand girl just because I lost a game of rock, paper, scissors.
パシリがよく似合う西目さん。あかりを放置してどこへ行っていたのですか？
Oh, and here we have the man most suited to be an errand boy, Nishime. Where do you scurry off to, leaving me all alone? I was doing some Shima.
なるほど、脱いだのですか。後であかりも勇姿が見たいので、適当なタイミングで脱いでください。
Oh, so that means you stripped then? I want to see that too, so feel free to show me at some point. Oh my gosh, I feel like punching you in the face right now, Akari. Because he wore a judo uniform according to him himself. No thanks. Did you not know you don't strip down the Okinawan
知っ
version?
てますよ。着替えシーンを見せろと言っているのです。
Oh, of course I knew that. I'm asking you to show me the part where you change into the uniform. And I still feel like punching you in the face right now, Akari. What a weirdo. She was a total perv. A booming sound came from above. The fireworks had begun. We hurried over to the breakwater. They decorated the sky with red and blue lights. It was my first time seeing them up close. The sound really packed a punch. I fixed my gaze upward, completely ignoring the inevitable neck pain from straining it too much. Partway through, Leland then began to say things that were pretty alarming, like, I can do that too, and shall I try making them now? Meanwhile, Goldilocks gloated while pointing to a golden set of fireworks, explaining that she sponsored them herself. It was nice watching fireworks with friends. Real nice. I couldn't help but get all sappy from it. I looked over to see Higa gazing up at the sky, utterly captivated by the show. She looked like a work of art. I was absolutely smitten with her and her ex-idol charms. Is something wrong? Seems like she thought I wanted to talk to her, but had trouble considering how loud the fireworks were. She leaned over to me. Her suddenly closing in got me all flustered. When I peeked over at her, her face looked red too. I guess she had only now realized what she'd done. How adorable. It made me want to poke fun at her a bit. You know, I think I like you, Higa. I whispered in her ear. I expected to see her grow even redder from embarrassment. But surprisingly, her reaction was completely different. No, I don't think I'm the one you like, Nishime. She spoke in a warning tone. Something about her was different than usual. How can you say that so confidently?
いろんな男の人にね、いっぱい声をかけられたから、わかるんだ。
I've been
どんな気持ちで近づいてきてるか。
I've been asked out.
そういう人たちと同じ。
I've been asked out by many men until now, so I know exactly how they feel when they approach me, and you feel like just like them, Nishime. There are traces of sadness in her voice. The sudden display of her experience left me perplexed. I only then realized that I was dealing with an adult. I felt bad. Why did I have to do that?
好きって言葉は軽々しく言ったらいけないんだよ。
You can't just give out confessions so easily, you know. I just got caught up in the moment, I'm sorry.
いいよ。本気じゃなくても嬉しいから。
No worries, it was nice to hear even if you didn't mean it. She booped and hit my nose with her finger. It was a very adult thing to do. Can I ask you something?
何？
What is it? Have you ever gone out with any of the guys that hit on you? I asked purely because I was curious. I might even go as far as to call it morbid curiosity. I have. I see. That wasn't surprising. but my voice betrayed my true thoughts.
はい。
Want to hear about it? I do. I jumped at the opportunity to hear her story, which made Higa giggle. It was the same way as one time we went to a cafe together, so I could easily guess what her next words would be. It's a secret. She ended the conversation with her charming adult flair. Here I was, completely smitten, yet I wasn't in love. What really is love anyway? I began to ponder the concept as if I were a lovelorn maiden. Embarrassed at myself, I forcefully shifted my attention back to the fireworks. The area was filled with noise from the hustle and bustle of the vendors and the booming of the fireworks. But despite that, I overheard Leland mumbling how beautiful to herself Claire's day. Over. Yep, it says end of agent's story, but we don't know for sure. Okay, we're kind of close on time, but since this is the epilogue, I'm just gonna go through it entirely and then I'll call it. My grandfather called. Hey there, didn't have any electricity for a while, so I couldn't call you. How are things? They're fine. I told him I got a new job. I also told him about some of my new friends. Wait, were they friends? Well, acquaintances. How are things over there? What do you mean you didn't have any electricity? There ain't no electricity out here in the boonies, and these are the only places you can find real shamans. Wait, what? Real shamans? Sounds like you're up to some shady stuff as usual. Ha ha ha. That's what I live for anyway. What ended up happening with the Neural Priestess business? Oh, that? There was an accident during the initiation ceremony, so it was cancelled. Cancelled? So they've recovered? What has? I'm just talking to myself. Don't mind me. He refused to answer despite my prodding. His tone always changed whenever the Neural Priestesses came up in our conversations. These rituals were intangible cultural properties. So why did they bother him so much? By the way, isn't it about time the festival started? Yeah, it did, earlier today in fact. Not that one, I mean the ritual on the second day. That's tomorrow. I have to stay at home during that, right? Actually, I'd appreciate it if you took a look for me. What? What again? But I'm not allowed to see it, right? Ha ha ha. They'd kick you off the island if they caught you, that's for sure. How's that funny? I'm just teasing you. Forget what I said. Gladly. We made some small talk before hanging up. What a weird old coot. No matter how fascinated he was with the neural or the rituals, he really shouldn't be forcing me to break the island rules. If he wanted to see them so bad, he could just do that himself. Let's see, Samugi, huh? I didn't have any means of getting back to Hisaku Island after the festival, so I stayed at Grandma's. Even if the water and electricity were shut off, everything else was untouched. I pulled out a futon and slept in my old room. I took a deep breath, taking in all the nostalgic sense of the past. Memories of my first day here came flooding back. I had forgotten every detail of my life and somehow ended up here. My parents died in an accident, and I was all alone. But was I really? Something bothered me whenever I recalled the story I was told regarding my past. What was I doing before I started staying with Grandma? I faintly remembered walking in some forest. A forest I'd never seen before. No, that wasn't right. It was Mount Nenufar, up north, I think. I was wandering through the forest, and when I found my way out, I was surrounded by people in kimono. I remembered taking a defensive stance. After they said a few words to me, I lowered my blade. That's right, I had a sword on me then. Afterwards, the kimono-clad people led me through an estate. We entered a room that seemed like some sort of audience chamber. An old lady with black hair appeared before me. I remembered her face clear as day. It was the Kiminarai. Welcome. She greeted me wholeheartedly. The priestess bowed her head. Wasn't she one of the highest authorities on this island? Why was she bowing her head to me? Speaking of which, didn't I only start living on Toyotoki Island after the incident? What was I doing there? I wondered why these memories were surfacing now. I believed we hadn't met at that point. I was so confused. The more I remembered, the more my head hurt. What I just saw in my memory and the story my grandmother told me didn't match up. The sun began to rise. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. Leland's story unlocked. Alright. It looks like that's it, but I'm just gonna go into the loading screen so it doesn't do anything. Okay, yep, alright. But that's it for the story, guys. And with that, I'm gonna call it here, even though it's a little early. I thank you all for coming. If you're watching this over on YouTube, be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this, and if you'd like to chill with me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to hopefully be notified of when I'll be live again. And if you're on Twitch, you know what to do. Let's see, speaking of those on Twitch, let me go check on someone to raid. Okay, let's see here. See, someone's on that I'd like to raid, so let's go ahead and give them a raid. Let's see. They are Raging Buckeye. They're pretty cool and fun. Let's see what he's playing, because I couldn't get a good idea of it. Okay, it says he's playing Dwarf Paladin. So I hope you all enjoy that. And if not, I hope you enjoyed hanging out with him, because he's a nice dude. And with that, give Buckeye my regards and tell him I'll be there when I can. And with that out of the way, I thank you all again for coming. Bye! Come on. There we go. And that.